Carlsbad Beach here in California, and I'm going to be painting from up here.
All right, well, I am starting out with this lovely sea lion that came up to visit me. He just sort of clambered up on this rock here and just held this pose for a few minutes. So I quickly moved over to where I could get a better view of him and put up a fresh canvas. And so I started just right in. He held this pose, which just struck me as just, you know, a sea lion majestic. So I quickly got a mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue and started drawing the basic shape that I saw of the sea lion. And he held this for, a little while, so I was able to capture that quick silhouette shape. And so just loosely laying it on there, I wasn't really thinking about composing a beautiful painting rather than just quickly capturing the color notes and interesting contours and shape of his form. And so that's what I'm working on in this short little segment, just laying in the basic design of the sea lion. Next, I'm going to start capturing some of the solid masses of color as I saw it in his fur. When you are working on an animal from life, you want to sort of capture a visual image of their basic form. And you want to try to do that very quickly. And once I'm content with the shape of the sea lion, I just mask in an overall dark shape. And I know that the shape may not be perfect, so later I'll come in with some of the background color and sort of sculpt out a little bit more of the shape, trying to get a little more accurate. For this dark color, I am using burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and occasionally I'll add a little bit more yellow ochre and white to get a little bit more of that fur color where the light's hitting it. And then on the back side of him, I added just a little bit of blue and white to the mixture to create the illusion of sort of bounced light back there from the stone and the cool shadow coming up and hitting him back there. And so you can see how by using a fully loaded stiff brush, you can just sculpt out around your form by using those background colors to kind of correct the overall shape of them. after I'm satisfied with the background and putting in a little bit of the shadow that he's sort of sitting on, I want to go back through then and just really sort of focus on tightening up his form, massing in the bulk. And that's what I work on for the rest of this short little study, is just kind of fine-tuning some of those areas that I felt needed a little bit more feeling of weight and mass, as well as some of those colors, because this is really, it was just a study in capturing, obviously, just an animal that's sitting out there. So you do have to work quickly, and you want to capture the essence of what it is that it is you're studying. And in this case, it was a big chubby sea lion. So I didn't feel that he had quite that feeling of bulk and weight, so I wanted to go back through and just pull some of that out a little bit more. So today I am so excited to be bringing you this video from Carlsbad, California. I was way up on top of this beautiful cliff overlooking this stunning beach and the waves. I hope you enjoy this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about before I get really going into this is my setup. So this is a plein air easel that I really like best, especially for filming, because you can see the palette right there. This is a design called an Open Box M, and this is their smaller size. It's an 8x10, and I have it set on a tripod. Behind the box is one of those little units that clip onto your tripod, and they come with a extension that goes off to the side. You can pick whatever side. I prefer to have it on that one over there. And then clipped to that extension is a cup. In the cup is a little bit of linseed oil. And you can't really see on the camera here, but off to the right of my painting box, I have hanging in a little bucket, my little bucket of odorless mineral spirits. This is Gamsol. And I really just have it to clean my brush. I did not start out with a toned canvas today, just went straight into white, because my colors were so bright and clean and vibrant that I really wanted some of that white to show through from the unprimed surface. So I am starting with my basic palette of titanium white, cadmium yellow pale, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, a little bit of phthalo green, and some alizarin crimson. So I just draw out my design on my canvas, and this is just a gessoed masonite panel. It's also an 8x10. I drew my design on there from my thumbnail sketch, which I don't have on camera, but I just came up with a very simple design like this, and so just sketched it on with a thinned mixture of little ultramarine blue and sienna, thinned down with the Gamsol. Sketched it in place, and then I started from the furthest area back, which of course is the sky, and I'm going to be working my way to the foreground. So I won't be talking over this entire video, but just in and out. So I began with the sky. I did a very soft, almost a yellowish haze towards the horizon. And then where the line, you can see on the little inset picture, the horizon line was not a clearly defined, here is the ocean and here is the sky separation. There was this really cool haze that sort of filtered up. Mm-hmm. And so that is just a little bit of ultramarine blue, sienna, and most of it was just the white that I had on my brush when I painted the sky. You could see in between the cliff ridges, way in the back, this almost misty air that filtered from the ocean up in through those separations from land masses. The further away, of course, the lighter they are. The challenge with painting atmosphere is the more you zoom in on anything, especially, getting these values right, the more you look at it, the longer you spend time looking at it, the darker it tends to become. So you can have a tendency to really zero in on those cliffs back there and paint them darker than they need to be. So what you need to do is always be checking back at your very darkest dark of your whole scene. And in this case, that would be the foreground passages. So while I'm painting those faraway hills, I'm comparing the values to the foreground values all the time. And you'll see too, I do go back to these hills more than once, and just to lighten them a little bit because the value had gotten a little darker. So that is our tendency as painters. To try to get the values accurate, you really have to look at your entire scene frequently. Just flick your eyes around. And of course, the whitest white of the scene was the blinding glare on the ocean way far away in the horizon. And I try to get some of that with a little bit of cadmium yellow and white. So I zoomed in here a little bit so you can see a little better of what I was talking about. That lighter tone there, I'm just showing you that as my mist that's rising up from the water. I'm just putting a soft hint of that in between those cliff ridges. And you can see too, as I'm working around, how I am gradually just darkening the earth, the part of the soil that goes up. And to do that, I just added a little bit more ultramarine blue and sienna, a little bit more ochre as it comes towards us, because everything closer to us is a lot warmer and richer and darker. And I wanted to also get the sand in, and that has a lot more ochre and sienna than the blue. And so as it's coming at us, I'm adding a little more white and a little more yellow ochre just to give it some more just intensity as it comes at us. Far away there, where I started the sand, it's more in shadow along the cliff line. And it's a lot grayer than we realize when painting sand. So I wanted to make sure that I did add just a touch of the blue in the sand color. It's very important when painting land with interesting land topography to always check that your brush strokes are showing the form of the land. So I'm taking my brush stroke in very clear, decisive strokes with a start and a stop, laying down passages of that. And if it's a wrong stroke or the wrong color or whatever, you can scrape it off and start over, or just go right over the top of it if the paint's not too thick, and just make those adjustments as you go along. What I'm doing here now as the land comes much closer to us is I'm isolating, when I squint way down at that distant hill, where are those darkest passages in the land? And so I'm establishing those very dark land formations and shadows where they are. Now that I have the patterns of the hillside in place with the bushes and the foliage, I start laying down the lighter passages near me of the paths and the different terraces as it sort of slopes downhill. So there was this path that was on a more horizontal plane as opposed to the more vertical passages, and so it was getting a lot more sunlight hitting those areas. So I'm putting a lighter dirt passage, almost the sand color, in those areas where the paths sort of wound around these cliff sides. In this passage here, I am just really focusing my attention on creating that interesting contour where the land meets the sand. And I'm cognizant of the edges where some of the places I took the dark and just streaked it right into the sand as it would be in nature. And then other parts I wanted a crisp, sharp edge where there was more of a separation from the cliff to the sand, where it just sort of rose and had a sharp edge. So that's making that contour interesting as well as adding variety. In this passage, you can see here how the sand has a richer, warmer, more yellow ochre hue to it as it comes closer to us, and further back it has a bluer haze. And so in doing that way, you can show a little bit more distance from near to far. And then I just had to get this palm tree in because, you know, I was in California and I was so happy to have a palm tree in my scene. They don't have those in Ohio, so it was really fun to make sure that I put one in that had the appearance of blowing in the breeze. And the light was shining through the top leaves, and I really wanted to get that. I don't think you can really see that well in the film here, but I used a little bit more cad yellow and some blue in there to have that appearance of the light shining through there. And by flicking the brush and doing a few soft little hoofs like that, it just has that interesting feel that way. Now I painted the wet sand with a little bit more ultramarine blue, and there's some alizarin crimson in it, and then just the color of the sand that I had on my palette, I just mixed into it. And so I'm again painting that on in the same direction that I would use the brush strokes to show the surface level of the sand. So nice horizontal strokes, and then obviously much lighter and smaller as it goes back. Now the water I paint with ultramarine blue, a little bit of phthalo green, and some white. As the water gets closer to us, I add a little bit of yellow ochre to get some of that sort of deep water green effect. The challenge with painting something like the ocean that is constantly moving is you have to select a specific design that when you look over there, you see sort of a standard, consistent pattern of the way it moves and the way it has certain effects. Like the whole area near the shore was full of this beautiful sea foam, delicate lace netting over the water. And so when you squint down at that, what is revealed is just a thin value shift. So it goes from dark blue in the middle of the water to this almost light, chalky seafoam area towards the shore. Instead of standing up there trying to draw all those teeny little patterns, squint down at it and it unifies the detail, and all you see is this subtle shift in value to that light blue. So way far back there, like I said, that was the strongest area of light, and I really wanted to draw the viewer back in there, and I wanted to also create that effect of that glaring bright light. That intense light is not going to show up unless my darks around there are significant enough to really make those lights stand out bright. So that water that I had back there, the blue water, had to be dark enough to make that light stand out. So I did actually push the value of the water a little bit darker than what I saw. So in these passages in here, I'm just taking an almost dry brush and I'm going through and just gently pulling out or accentuating some of the highlights in the water and some of the waves, just the crests where you see some of the whiter tints on the water. And I'm also just making sure that I don't have any brush strokes that are not perfectly horizontal. You can see a little bit in the water back there, there's that subtle hint of the phthalo green and white with a little bit of blue, and I'm just adding a little bit in here where I felt it needed a little bit more of that coming through. It wasn't really there very much in real life, but I do like to add a little bit of that, especially in painting the Pacific Ocean, because you do see some of this beautiful turquoise water. And so I pull that out a little bit more. And then this is a filbert brush, and I just turn it on the side and it makes it very small. And so I'm just using the corner of that to get some of those smaller detailed passages in there that look very lace-like. You can just gently skitter your brush along the surface of the water to get some of that effect.